Grab that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus visionary, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, welcome to episode number 215 of TOGCHAT Live. This episode of TOGCHAT is sponsored by PPA, the Professional Photographers of America. PPA is a worldwide organization, folks, that is made up of over 30,000 photographers. It provides equipment insurance, education, and business tools made specifically for photographers. I have a link for you in the show notes below to check out all the awesome features for PPA members and to save $25 on a new membership. As always, I'm already seeing photographers tuning in here from all over the world right now, so please be sure to check in, leave a comment in the chat, and let me know that you're here and where you are in the world. I mean, already I've got Joseph from the Netherlands, I've got Dan from California, Ken in Cheshire in the UK, we've got Lynn in New York, I got Luis in Portugal, D Psycho in Plano, Texas, Patrick in Paris, let's see, Joe in Michigan, Eric in New Jersey, Kirsten in Northern Ireland, Alan from Denmark. It's always so cool. I'm sorry for geeking out, but it's so cool to see so many people from so many different countries tuning in to chat about their love of photography. As always, I hope that you guys are healthy, safe, and of course, still practicing your social distancing and wearing your masks in public. Hey gang, I've got a huge, serious favor to ask of you. You see that thumbs up down there? Please click it. I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography for the next 60 minutes. It would help more people find my channel and TOGCHAT if you could do me a solid and hit that thumbs up. And of course, while you're looking down there, feel free to hit that share button and let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. You can go ahead and share the link that I'm putting in the chat window, tog.chat/live. Twitter, Facebook, they're the fastest way to get the word out. So, new week, new TOGCHAT. How can I help you with your photography tonight? Start posting your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them all in the next 60 minutes. And remember, this is a gear-free zone. We talk about the hows and whys behind creating great images and marketing yourself as a photographer. That might include some gear if it's a question about how to do something, but I'm not going to tell you what your next camera should be. And folks, please, I know it's fun to chat, but I'm going to ask you to save the chat for questions so that I don't miss anything important and so that you don't miss any of the important answers and questions in the chat noise. So remember, we're here to learn. Let's take a look at the important and interesting photo news for the week. So one of the great things that has come from the increased awareness of the need for diversity in our photography industry, camera companies are creating new opportunities for underrepresented and undersupported photographers. So recently, Sony, they announced that they are continuing and expanding on their Alpha female grant program this year by increasing the number of grant recipients to 12. Each recipient will receive a $5,000 grant to fund specific, well-defined projects. A full-frame Sony camera and lens to shoot said project, a 1-year Adobe Creative Cloud all-apps subscription, and a 1-year Sony Pro Support membership to go along with that. They'll also have the opportunity to have the project featured on alphauniverse.com and the Sony Alpha social media channels. There's also a separate Rising Storyteller search for the next great female filmmaker, which is being conducted in partnership with Sony Picture Entertainment Gemstone Studios, and it's done through a separate application process. I've included a link in the show notes for the application and more details. And Olympus has announced the Break Free program for emerging creatives to work with Olympus mentors. And I'm proud to say that I am one of the mentors, along with several other of my fellow Olympus visionaries, also Olympus educators, and Olympus explorers. The Break Free program is a 3-month hands-on opportunity to provide emerging photographers both the tools and mentoring support to bring their vision to life. So whether your vision is to chronicle an adventure, discover big details in miniature and doing macro photography, or shooting portraits in fashion, or to direct a short film in 4K video, Olympus wants to help. They will select up to 7 participants to participate in the program based on the creativity of the project proposed, skill level of the photographer, and how well the project fits within the Break Free brand values. As part of the program, participants will be given equipment and will have the opportunity to select an Olympus mentor. So what would you do if you had professional camera equipment from Olympus to create your passion project? What would you dream of creating? I've got a link to the program information and application in the show notes. Deadline for submissions is right around the corner. It's September 13th, and the program is open to photographers age 15 and up, meaning even if you're my age, you can apply. So let's go ahead and change gears. The prestigious annual Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition that is put on by London's Natural History Museum has posted an online collection of what they call highly commended entries that were submitted to this year's contest. Now, the grand prize and category winners won't be announced until October 13th, but this gallery gives us an inspiring look at the quality level of this year's contest, and it is off the charts. Over 49,000 entries from photographers representing over 25 nationalities. Now, look, obviously, I am not a wildlife photographer, so I am not going to pretend to be an expert. But I want to share with you a little trick for learning about making better images and self-evaluating your work. Now, this trick is not going to directly teach you how to create better photographs, but it will teach you what you should be striving for and how to determine what you need to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share the link to the gallery in the chat, and you can also find it in the show notes right below the video. And by the way, Unitas Photography, thank you so much for the super chat. I will get to your question for sure, okay? So to start, if you go ahead and you take a quick scroll through this gallery, I think most of you will agree that these images are indeed top-notch. I mean, I sincerely do not see a single image that I think could be reviewed as anything less than very good at a minimum. So as we scroll through these images, and I want you guys to participate in this conversation, as we scroll through these images, what are some generalized statements that we can make? So again, feel free to contribute it in the chat. I'll give you some examples of what I see and what I can learn by looking at these images. So we can see that these photographs tend to feature very bold and very strong colors. No SOOC, straight out of camera laziness, not at all. These images show us moments. Often, they're moments with lots of action and emotion. They tend to feature wildlife and locations that are either exotic or unusual. In other words, places and things that we don't see and experience or even see photos of routinely. Many of these images elicit kind of an emotional response. Sometimes it's shock, sometimes it's sadness, sometimes it's humor, and so on. So we can learn as we look at these images that you can create great wildlife images with both telephoto and wide-angle lenses. But if we take a close look at the wide-angle shots that are in here, we can also imagine that many of those wide-angle shots were probably taken with remote control cameras. So what I'm presenting to you and suggesting, and really what I want to try and impress on you, is that as you go about learning photography and learning to improve your photography, instead of seeking out and following rules, and instead of asking other people what you should and shouldn't do, What you should be doing is you should be looking at the images that you admire, the images that you would like to create, and then begin asking how. How did they create it? Understand that most of the time, the answers are actually in the photos, right? So by now, I'm sure that most of you probably think that the question that I was referring to in the title of tonight's talk chat is how. That's not it. How is a very important question. But most of you don't have a problem with that question. Asking how or what, they're functional questions. The most important question that photographers often forget to ask is why. Why is both inspirational and enlightening. Why is my favorite question. It has been my favorite question since I was a little kid. You know, it's kind of ironic that why is such a valuable question for us to ask, not just in photography, but in life. Yet we encourage our children to stop asking why because it's annoying and because it can be perceived as challenging authority. Look, as a photographer, asking why positions you to succeed. Now, if you're shooting for fun and you see something and you have that gut response of, oh, I should take a picture of that, by all means, grab your camera and just take that picture, especially if it's a fleeting moment. You don't want to miss the opportunity. But then set about making a picture by asking yourself, why? Why would this be an interesting photograph? What about the scene is important? How can I best make an interesting and creative image? And so on. You see, why sets up all of the other questions. Now, if you're a professional photographer and a client or a potential client comes to you and asks you to take a portrait of them, asking why is crucial. The answer to that question tells you why they want it. Knowing why they want it informs you how you need to shoot it and what lighting you should use and what kind of background you should use and so on. Asking why also leads you to ask other questions about how the image will be used, what colors will surround it, where it will be on the page, and so on. The answers to all of these questions determine how you need to shoot that image to have a successful outcome. And it all begins with why. Asking why eliminates confusion. In your personal work, it helps you make decisions that will create an image that allows people to immediately connect and understand the experience that you are trying to share with them. For professional work, the best way to get context in any situation is to ask why a lot. Asking why eliminates confusion caused by preconceived assumptions, which usually are fueled by lack of knowledge or, even more dangerously, partial knowledge. Why creates accountability to your own ideas and creative vision in your personal work, and accountability for both yourself and your client, so that the scope of the project is clearly understood and agreed upon. Between the fact that as humans, we tend to be lazy, and the fact that as a society, we discourage our children from continuing to ask why, this is a habit that will require effort to create. You got to work at it. But I assure you, it will pay you dividends in how your photography evolves and the quality of the images that you produce. One more thing before we dive into the questions for the evening. So for the last 3 weeks, I've done a deep dive into the different aspects of the PPA memberships. I want to wrap that up for you this week and give you the inside scoop on PPA events. Now, last week I reported to you that Imaging USA, which was scheduled for Grapevine, Texas in January, it has been moved to an online-only virtual event. It's going to run January 17th through the 19th, and it will still include the opening and closing keynote speakers, the educational programs, including the pre-conference classes, one of which will be taught by yours truly, the Imaging USA Expo, which is the trade show, that will still happen virtually, also the International Photographic Competition exhibit, the award and degree ceremony, the Grand Imaging Awards, and even the social activities will still take place online. Now, here's the cool part. PPA has dropped the registration fee to $59 for a 3-day all-access pass, regardless if you're a member or not. Look, I'll tell you straight up, you will not find a better program with better learning experiences than this one. And for $59, don't miss it. And if you're not already a PPA member, I would encourage you to join, and then the $59 registration fee is waived. Your first Imaging USA is free to attend. I got a link in the show notes below to the Imaging USA website and also the link for the new members to join for $25 off. But here's the thing, while Imaging USA is an incredible event, there's so much more that PPA does throughout the year to give you hands-on and virtual learning experience. And this page shows you just a few of those things. In addition to Imaging USA, PPA does offer regularly scheduled webinars that cover a range of photography topics by some of your favorite industry professionals. PPA members have the added benefit of being able to replay those webinars on demand. Also, as a small business owner, obviously you're crazy busy and your time is limited and it's valuable. For a quick dose of entrepreneurial inspiration and advice, PPA produces a Facebook Live every other Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. These quick 30-minute segments will help you address topics such as how to overcome business fears, what has changed in the industry, who your clients are and what they need, how to attract the right clients, and what it takes to conquer in-person sales. I'm honored to say that I was one of the first guests on this series. And as always, you know I could go on about PPA, but you're just not going to find a better set of resources and support that also provides excellent education and a way for you to connect with other photographers. If you're not a member, I don't know what you're waiting for. I assure you it will be the best money you will spend on your career as a photographer. Once again, the links in the description in the show notes. All right, let's get into tonight's questions, gang. How can I help you improve your photography? I have 2 questions that came in early. I've got a super chat from United Photography. We're going to get those first. And by the way, if you haven't joined my Facebook groups yet, why not? What are you waiting for? If you're a people shooter like me, you want to join the I Shoot People photography group on Facebook. And if you prefer more generalized type photography, then you want to go ahead and you want to join the TOG Knowledge group. I'm going to put the links to both of those right there in the chat so that you have them. And of course, they're also in the show notes for you. Okay. All right. So the first question that I had lined up here tonight, this one came in early, comes from Indy Layman. And the question is, what advice, practical or otherwise, do you have for photographing disabled people, other than treating them with dignity and respect like you would any other person, of course? So, Indy, honestly, that is first and foremost for me, that is the advice. And it shouldn't be something that we have to remind ourselves of, but I think most of us do. And that is that in a situation where you're working with a disabled person, I think it's really worth reminding yourself this person needs to be treated differently, and this person really needs to have your respect at all times. And the reason I say it that way, it's not that I'm saying, that any of you are mean or inconsiderate. No. I'm actually kind of highlighting my own inexperience. I shouldn't say inexperience. That's the wrong word too. Highlighting my own flaw. And that is that I'm really hyper. Shocker, right? So when I'm working in a situation and I'm shooting, especially if it's not just one-on-one with a person who is disabled, I'm working very, very fast, and it's easy to kind of forget those things, right? So number one, you need to create that awareness in your mind. So the fact that you highlighted that, I still think that's top of the list. Then from there, I think the challenge that you have, Indy, is it really depends on the context of the shoot or the photograph that you're creating. I am a big believer, and I do this with children. I do this with people of all ages. I like to put myself at a perspective, unless I'm doing something that's particularly creative. And then there's a reason maybe for a really low camera angle or really high camera angle. Otherwise, I like to put myself at a perspective where I am kind of on the same level as that person. So indeed, if I'm photographing someone who is in a wheelchair, as an example, I am rarely going to stand up, even though I'm only 5'8" and I'm not tall. I'm really going to stand up, straight and tilt the camera down and, do the shot that way. I want to put myself at their level. And honestly, it's got nothing to do with their disability. It's actually got to do simply with the fact that I think it just simply makes the image more interesting, period. Right? It's kind of that eye to eye, face to face connection type mentality. Beyond that, Indy, I find, and full disclosure, this is the reason why I don't have any specific like step 1, step 2, step 3. Let me tell you how I approach it. I am a big believer in the idea that knowledge is power and knowledge is understanding. That being said, I have no problem talking to subjects or potential subjects and asking them questions. Okay. I can't pretend or assume to understand what their experience is like. It's no different than, let's face it, everything that we are hearing on the news routinely this summer, unfortunately, with all the things that are happening and with the Black Lives Matter movement and all that, which I am completely supportive of. But at the same time, I can only attempt to understand it because I'm a white guy with white privilege. So I do my darndest to ask lots of questions. I do my darndest to show my subject, regardless of their disability or race or color or whatever, that I am sincerely interested in them and their unique experience, that I would like to understand them as much as possible. Now, the challenge is sometimes, Indy, when you're, maybe at an event or something like that, you don't have a lot of time. So you're doing this kind of very quick, and it's going to be very abbreviated, but it is being able to kind of make that connection and show that you recognize the person, you see the person, that you have empathy and that you want to understand. And if you can demonstrate that and demonstrate it quickly in those situations, honestly, it gives you permission to do something. It gives you permission to ask the tough questions, right? Because frequently you see a person with a disability and you kind of don't want to be, having to point out the obvious, or ask them a question. It's like, well, you're in a wheelchair, do you mind if I do this? Or can you get out of the wheelchair? Or what's your situation? Or, you kind of got all these questions. But if you're showing respect for the person, if you're showing empathy for the person, and you are making it clear in your behavior and your words that you actually care about them and the way they think and feel about their situation, it actually gives you a lot more leeway and permission to ask them direct questions. So if I have a situation, let's take, and I'm trying to think back to all the times I've, had to maybe deal with people in wheelchairs. If I've got a group shot that I'm going to do, and 90 to 99% of the people are, fully capable physically, so they are standing, then I've got one person in a wheelchair. What I see a lot of photographers do is the poor person in the wheelchair is like stuck off on the end of the group, or even they're stuck dead in the middle and they suddenly become the focus. That's a big assumption. I mean, it's easy to put them in the middle for us, the photographers, because it creates kind of some balance and symmetry, right? But it doesn't necessarily um, make them feel good, because by putting them in the middle, you're also potentially making them the focus and center of attention, and they may be uncomfortable with that. Okay. So in a situation like that, I'm going to make it a point to ask the person straight up. It's like, would you object if I put you in the middle, or would you rather be out, on the side or somewhere else? Okay. Even if it's a matter, if the availability's there, maybe I can have the whole front row sit down and I put them in the middle. It looks like everybody's seated. Boom. You don't always have that option. So that's why, unfortunately, in real life, in real time, you're working against deadlines. You're in a hurry. You've got people that you're dealing with. By having that connection, making that connection, and showing that their feelings matter, you're able to ask kind of the tough questions and ask them concisely. And I have found in my experience, you will get direct answers with appreciation, because that person realizes that you are trying your best in this situation that you're dealing with to take their thoughts and feelings into consideration and work with that. But I just do it. For me, the biggest thing is visually, I don't want an image where I'm looking down at them. To me, that's the ultimate insult, unless it's something that's particularly creative and there's kind of a perspective to it. Otherwise, I want to be at their level when I shoot. And actually, just like I would do with a regular portrait subject, maybe even a little bit below their eye level. So I'm kind of looking up at them. I don't want to create an image that looks down on them because they're so used to that perspective. So I hope that helps. I know it's not a step 1, 2, 3, but it's kind of that overarching mentality that what drives my decisions. Okay. All right. Next one that I have here that came in early, and then we're going to get to Unitas Photography. This one from Mark Rivera. How much difference is there between light modifier brands when it comes to the quality of light that each one creates? He says, I understand that the size relative to the subject, hard light, soft light, feathering. His question is, why should I pay $1,400 or $400 for a modifier other than the build quality? What is the reason to buy expensive light modifiers other than the above mentioned? Do different light modifiers have different color temperatures? Okay, so Mark, that's actually a great question. And the tough part of it is really challenging to determine that as you go from manufacturer's website to manufacturer's website. And for that matter, even if you could be in a camera store and actually touch and feel the materials and the fabrics, it's hard to determine that. So you are correct. Reason number one in terms of price is build quality, right? You can buy very well built, very heavy duty, very almost non-destructible modifiers of both the permanent and collapsible type. And then you can buy really inexpensive ones that, are really, really thin fiberglass rods that will snap, or thin metal tips on those fiberglass rods that will break off or bend off very easily. Or even for that matter, the thin metal rods in them that will change shape, and ultimately then you can't get it to close up flat and all that kind of stuff. That's one piece. The other piece is indeed fabric. But the challenge of it is manufacturers, even the better manufacturers, I'm going to get myself in trouble for this, but this company knows I'll say this about them. They do a bad job of communicating it. So if you have followed me for any period of time, you know that I sometimes comment that I feel that Westcott modifiers are pricier than they should be. Not that it's up to Joe Edelman to decide what they should charge for their modifiers, right? But at the same time, I'm a firm believer in, hey, I want to see a company make money and succeed, but I also expect that company to maintain the responsibility of managing their finances and their business well, so that they're not just grossly profiting. In other words, they better be offering one heck of a value proposition if their products are going to be that much more. Westcott modifiers tend to be rather pricey. Now, here's a little known fact about Westcott modifiers. Westcott modifiers actually has some of the best material on the market. Now, the material that I'm talking about, folks, I'm talking about the diffuser that goes in the front, and I'm talking about the baffle and then the lining material. The outside material, theirs is just fine, but that's not having any real impact on your photograph. That does impact the durability somewhat, but it's not impacting your photograph. They use very high quality material for their diffusers, and they put it through lots of testing, And they claim, I've never personally tested it, but they claim, and when I say they, you don't find this information on their website. I, over the years, have had several conversations with their sales and marketing people. And of course, they don't like the fact that I comment about their pricing. And, they basically explained to me, this is why our stuff costs a little bit more. And my point to them was, why don't you guys market that? Why don't you advertise that? And they still don't advertise that. So you do that information what you wish. But they insist that their material is well tested, very durable. It's going to last for 10 years or more without any fading. So I will give you an example. In the past, I have owned some very expensive, I don't now, but I did years ago, some very expensive Shimura softboxes. Part of the reason they were very expensive is because they were also very big. They were like 4 foot by 6 foot softboxes. But Shimura is a very pricey brand. Their front panel material faded so fast. Now, the irony of it was, now that I said that, the two that I had, they were visibly yellow. But they gave me a really nice warm light that I particularly liked for my people photography. The problem of it is that was just for a short window of time. If I had not gotten rid of them and I kept using them, they would have continued to fade and it would have got to be too yellow and it would not have been a good light at all. But the fact of the matter is they faded and were fading and were getting worse. So these were very high-end, pricey modifiers, and the material was not holding up well. The studio that I had those modifiers in had a dehumidifier. It was temperature controlled, all that kind of stuff. So they were in a good environment. They were not in an environment that was detrimental. So really what you need to do, Mark, and there's no simple resource for this. I'm sorry. My advice would be to go to your local photo retailers, or better yet, reach out to various photographers that are using different brands and ask them about how long they have had the modifiers and if they have had any discoloring. Honestly, gang, even with the lesser expensive modifiers, in terms of the durability aspect, unless you are literally going to be abusive towards your gear, even the cheap stuff is going to hold up pretty well because there's not a lot going on with a modifier, right? But the key to it is the color temperature. And that's not something that when you read the marketing for modifiers, they don't have a color temperature listed. None of them talk about what is any kind of a rating or the durability of their material in terms of its color properties. They don't tell you that. But that's the piece that you've got to worry about. I can tell you, for most of my career, you may know, I used PhotoFlex modifiers. I still have some PhotoFlex modifiers that I use today. I am very happy with them. I really like them. For the last 2 years, I have been using the Photox Rajas. And I can tell you that in those 2 years, they have held up extremely well. Some of them have traveled with me. The rest have been in my studio. Actually, I was just looking at them the other day and had that thought, like, how's the color holding up on these? The color on the diffusers and the baffles is just fine. It's holding up very well. Granted, I'm only 2 years in, but I'm seeing no signs of any discoloration, anything like that. What I like about the Rajas in particular, well designed. They have a good durability feel to them, and they're very reasonably priced. They're not cheap, but they're also not crazy expensive. So, things for you to consider. All right, so let me get back up here to Unitas Photography Super Chat. And I saw there's some follow-ups here. All right, so getting out of your comfort zone on a big project. Photos, me, easy. Video, new. My hire. As lead, the onus is on me for smooth production. Any tips you can share with leading projects with other creatives? Oh, wow. Okay, so so many things that I could share, Unitas. The first thing I would tell you is Uber organization, right? So I talked about the why question tonight. Part of what that why drives is the expectation aspect. So if you are subcontracting or working with, new hires that are going to be under you doing work for you, the biggest mistake that I find creatives make in general is they're really, really creative, but they suck at communication, right? So, we've all heard that, that phrase of, what happens when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, right? So really the biggest thing is make sure that you are investing the time, and hopefully you have been smart enough to build that time into your pricing, etc. But you need to invest the time before the day of the shoot or shoots so that you are um, really making sure that you are getting everybody on the same page, outlining and detailing all the expectations, who's got responsibility for what, who's doing what, etc. I would encourage you to do it in some form of documentation that is shareable amongst all parties. That could be using a platform like Trello, which is a note keeping and kind of sharing program, or it could be something as simple as working with a Google document that you shared with everyone. And basically, you're outlining all the details are in there. Everyone has access to it. They're able to ask questions and send notes to each other. Just super, super important. And then, understand that a great management technique in general is, to really, the more you understand about what you're asking people to do, even if the fact is that you're hiring them because you're not particularly good at doing it, you don't want to basically say, okay, well, I'm hiring them because they're good at video, so I don't have to worry about the video. That's a bad idea. You need to be very worried about the video. So you need to be learning as much as you can about the needs for the video. You don't have to necessarily get into the weeds, but you've got to learn as much as you can beforehand so that you are able to communicate with them in their language, because that's your responsibility, not theirs. And this is where the why comes in. You basically then have to hold them accountable during the project. So, okay, so what I've told you what I need. This is what the client needs. This is what you have to deliver. How are you going to do that? When they give you the first answer, why? Why that? Why not something else? When they answer that, okay, great. How come this? How come not that? Right? And challenge it. Not to be like a pain in the butt, but and you make it clear, like, look, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding as much as possible, because obviously at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what goes right or wrong here. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding those decisions. So honestly, it's all about communication. Adam, thank you so much for the super chat, man. It has been a while, yes. And Katala, gosh, I hope I haven't butchered your name. I'm so sorry. I did not see a super chat from you, but if you have a question in here, I'll be sure to get to it. Don't worry, we don't have too many questions in. So I appreciate your trying. And if you get it through, cool, no big deal. So United, I hope that helps. I mean, I would recommend to you that you do as much kind of advanced learning to at least have an understanding of what it's going to take on the video if you're hiring somebody else to do video. So again, that you can communicate their language and just really put the effort in to making sure that you're communicating and that everybody's on the same page. I talk about it a lot with makeup artists. The first time photographers seem to hire makeup artists, they do this thing where the makeup artist shows up and they're kind of like a eager beaver, little puppy. It's like, okay, tell me what you want, and the photographer's like, oh, you're the expert, do your thing, which is like the worst piece of direction that anybody could ever give. And then you talk to that photographer like a week later, and they're like, oh, that makeup artist sucked. They didn't do this and do that. It's like, dude, you gave them no direction. You don't have the right to say that they sucked. So don't make that mistake, right? If you're subcontracting to this video company, you're on the hook for it, and you need to think that way. So you need to make sure that they understand what you want, and then you need to basically make sure that they're explaining to you every detail of how it's being done. And then even when it comes time to shoot this project, if you're kind of working simultaneously, shooting stills, then doing video, whatever, you need to give yourself enough time that you're able to do your work as the stills guy, but then also be able to oversee, not necessarily even supervise, but oversee and approve of what the video team is doing. Okay? I hope that helps. All right. So let me scroll back up here where the questions started coming in. I got one from Joe's Photography early on in Michigan. Question is, when making video, what is the best frame? The best frame. I'm assuming you mean best frame rate. Okay. I'm using a simple video editor to make my own simple slideshow, so I'm stuck on, okay, what frames per second I should use when rendering it. Joe, that is one of those questions that if you get 6 people shooting video in a room, you're going to get 5 different opinions for sure. Okay. Generally speaking, if you go to the movie theater and you watch a motion picture, you're going to be watching that motion picture at 24 frames per second, which means there's actually a lot of blur going on, but our brains kind of blend it all together, okay? When you watch television, like a sitcom, you're usually going to see that show at about 30 frames per second, some at 60, but usually at 30. Here on YouTube, you will find people shooting stuff at 30 frames per second. That's kind of I think for the most part, that's kind of the standard, but you will see people that do 60 frames per second, etc. Part of your decision, Joe, is going to depend upon how crisp do you want the feel of the video. So I'm not talking really about sharpness. I'm talking about crispness. So to give you an example, right, I am recording this video. So I'm going to confuse a little bit more here, but these are the things that you have to consider. Patrick, thank you so much, man, for the super chat. I saw your question. I will get to you in just a second. I am transmitting this video at 30 frames per second. But generally, the way you set your video up is if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you would double that number to get your shutter speed. So you would shoot at a 60th of a second. But I'm actually shooting at 1/90th of a second because I'm on a green screen, right? So if I was shooting at the slower shutter speed on the green screen, you would tend to get edging and things along my hands when I move. So the faster shutter speed helps combat that. So it's a combination both of frame rate and shutter speed that is going to give you the feel that you want. So certainly when you start getting to 60 frames per second and or higher, and you start using faster shutter speeds, the image starts to get incredibly crisp. Eric, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. The image starts to get incredibly crisp, and it can almost look a little bit fake. But here's the thing. Some people like that, right? Others don't. So my advice, at least for what you're describing, unless there's more information you're going to throw at me, is probably to try and work around 30 frames a second, because that's kind of the most common frame rate on YouTube. So it sounds like what you're doing is going to be something that's going to go up on social media. 30 frames a second would be fine. But you wouldn't be wrong if you did it at 60 frames a second either. So I hope that helps. It's not a direct answer because there are a lot of options. For what you're doing, since it's a slideshow thing, don't kill yourself and don't overthink it. Once you start picking up a camera and actually shooting video, then you have to pay a lot more attention to the frame rates and to the shutter speeds so that you're getting the effect that you want in terms of the overall kind of crispness and vibe of that video. Okay? All right. So Patrick, going back to yours here. Thank you again so much for the super chat. Let me just find a question here. I saw it go by. Where'd it go? There he is. Joe, I know you were a product photographer. I've done a little bit of everything, but indeed, have you had the opportunity to use a polarizing filter on jewelry, for example? If so, is it better to use it on the lens or on the flash or both? So that's a great question, Patrick. Literally one time I used a polarizer on a product shoot, and it was for jewelry. I was photographing for a company that was actually local to me at the time. I was photographing findings. Findings are rings without the diamonds, right? So it's just the ring part, not the actual diamond. And a large majority of these particular findings were silver. So, of course, they had to be highly polished, which meant they were also highly reflective, and which meant that, no matter what I was doing with, reflectors and boards and basically trying to fill in reflections in that, it was kind of very unwieldy. And obviously I'm working with a macro lens and I'm shooting, these rings. They're small, right? So that was the one time for me as a product photographer that I went ahead and used a polarizer, and it was actually very, very helpful. Still required a lot of finessing, right? Certainly you could take the approach of polarizing the lights. For me, I guess my thought process, Patrick, would be that's going to be a lot more work. If I was going to polarize the lights, I would definitely prefer to not work with strobes. I would rather work with constant lighting and work with, LEDs. because then it's a what you see is what you get situation. So as I'm changing and playing with the filters, it's going to be a lot easier. So in that situation for me, I went with a polarizing filter on the lens. But at the end of the day, and so I'm not speaking as an accomplished product photographer, right? There was a period of about 5 years of my life where I was doing almost exclusively product work. During that time period, and a big part of what I was shooting at that time, I was shooting 4x5 sheet film. So I really just worked with the philosophy that I was going to get my light right, period. And so that's why filters really were never that much of a consideration. I wound up using the filters when I shot the ring findings simply because they were kicking my butt. I spent a whole day working on a lighting setup because I had a lot of them due. I was 30 or 35 that I shot. And I literally spent a whole day, working with Polaroids and testing to try and get, what I needed. And it was a nightmare. So finally it was like, yeah, go pull out the Polaroid. And the Polaroid gave me it basically became kind of the equalizer in my situation. I wasn't quite getting my light where I needed it to be. The polarizer got me to where I wanted to be and allowed me to get the job done. I see Dan just added in here, photographing watches. He finds that a polarizer makes the watch crystal disappear, which, certainly, I mean, anytime you're going to do the polarizer thing, if you overdo the polarizer, it's going to kind of work against you. But with a watch, depending on what you're doing, having that crystal almost disappear, not completely disappear, can be very advantageous. Depends on the shot and the angle you're setting up and everything. But he mentions here it has a great clarity effect. Otherwise, he uses a lot of white cards along with the light box. And that's the thing. I mean, for me, back when I was doing product work and some of my online presentations and in a few of my videos, I've shown images that I did of glass and metal gas meters for dentist offices. And that's like the ultimate nightmare. You've got shiny silver polished metal surfaces with glass wraparound coverings. So any direction you go, you're picking up a highlight from a light. And, in situations like that, it's all about white cards and trying to, not actually have any of the light directly hitting the object, as opposed to lighting the card surrounding it and basically filling in the light. But even then, you're actually not trying to get everything filled in evenly. You still have to have areas that are going to be brighter and others that are going to be a little bit darker so that you're creating subtleties and so that you still have that feeling of depth to the product that you're shooting. So Patrick, I hope that helps. It's not a simple answer, but I would say at least start with a polarizing filter if you want to explore that area. And then from there, maybe, if you're not getting what you want, then consider the gels. But I would only use the gels with WYSIWYG lighting, meaning constant light, so it's what you see is what you get. That would be my approach. Okay. All right. So Stephanie, I usually do donation shoots like veterans events, my disability shoot, etc. I have a fun shoot with 2 models on Sunday. One wants post-apocalyptic and one romantic. What why questions would you ask? Well, so I mean, honestly, Stephanie, the key is not for me to tell you why questions. I'm going to give you a few, right? But the key really is you need to be that curious. If you're not that curious, it's going to be really hard to nail the shoot, right? Because I mean, right out of the box, somebody says to me, well, like, yeah, I want something that's post-apocalyptic. That doesn't generate a why from you? Sure as hell does me. Like, why? Please describe post-apocalyptic. What exactly are you thinking? That's where I'm starting, because that's my initial gut curiosity. And that answer is going to load up all of the other questions. Okay. Where's it going? What's it for? Is it just for the sake of it? What's the point? What about a makeup artist? What are we dealing with, with makeup, with costuming, with the outfit? I would want to know what it looks like. No way in the world to do something post-apocalyptic, whatever. Am I going to show up the day of the shoot and be surprised with whatever this person has, put together? I'm actually going to assume that they suck at what they're doing, and I want to see it. Okay, because that way then I have some input, and I can, I can kind of push the process a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I find that, and it goes back to the answer that I gave, Stephanie, the answer that I gave to the question the gentleman had about photographing people with disabilities, and even going back to my comments tonight about the question why. And I do not want to get political here, so I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. We have developed in our society a kind of political correctness, which I want to be clear, I feel there's a lot of value to. So I am not saying that it's bad that we have political correctness. But I think the challenge that we sometimes have as a result of it is, if we are trying to be respectful towards someone and to be politically correct and not say things that we shouldn't say or ask things that we shouldn't ask, et cetera, et cetera. The problem we have then is we create this awkward situation ourselves because of our own fears and anxieties that, well, we don't want to say the wrong thing or we don't want to offend somebody. And then we're trying to do what we do kind of with one hand tied behind our back, right? Because we don't have the information that we should have. Now, in all fairness, sometimes the reason why photographers are working with one hand behind their back is because they're too damn lazy to do the legwork before the shoot. Sorry, gang, just keeping that real, okay? But the way that I combat that, Stephanie, is it's truly, I mean, I've learned over the years that if I'm sincere in my questions, and if my words demonstrate, and my behavior demonstrates, and my photography demonstrates that I want to make a great picture, I can ask whatever the hell I want to ask, as long as it's moving us towards getting a better picture. And I'll tell you one of the other additional benefits of having those conversations. And so I guess the short answer is, Stephanie, it's like, just be nosy, but be nosy as a human being, a sincere human being, right? But here's the benefit. Oftentimes when you have those conversations and you ask those pointed questions, indeed, you are respectfully, but you are kind of challenging that person's concept, idea, thoughts. And frequently, you're actually pointing out to them without saying, hey, look, your idea is stupid. You're forgetting this, this, and this. No. But by asking these questions, you're actually making them realize they've overlooked so much about this thing. They just had this kind of 50,000-foot idea, and they hadn't really flushed it out. Now what you're doing is you're trying to really work through it and flush it out with them, and it points out these other problems without you having to say a word. And the best part of it is, it doesn't mean that the idea sucked. It just means that, okay, so let's sort that out. And now what have you done? Now you've kind of forced that person to really collaborate with you, right? Because based on those two categories, Stephanie, it sounds to me like they want to create something that's unique and different. Well, okay, so right out of the box, that sets the stage. You are not just a hired gun. You're not going to create something that's unique and different just because they have a cool costume. This is a concept that requires a lot of collaboration and brainstorming and can only be better with more creative minds contributing, right? And since you're going to be the one that presses the button, that also means you're the one with the final say, because you don't get to walk away from that shoot and blame the subjects for their costumes or the makeup or any other stuff. Because I'm pretty sure nobody's going to arrive at that shoot with a gun, hold it to your head, and force you to pull the trigger. Once you pull the trigger and press the shutter, you own everything that's there. You don't get to blame somebody. So that's where this collaboration thing comes in, and that's where the questions come in. So lots of questions, get all the answers, and at the same time, in the course of getting them to answer those questions, let's assume, let's be optimistic. They've really got their act together. They've got a clear vision, all this stuff. So by doing that, it's also helping you get a clear vision of what it is they want to achieve. If they're into, this post-apocalyptic person, if they're like into cosplay and that, and they do all kind of costumes and things like that, they've probably already taken some pictures of this outfit, even just like in their room where they're putting it together. Get them to share those pictures with you. That way you have a sense before they even show up, this is what it's going to look like. This is the color scheme, all that kind of stuff. The more information you have, the better. So I hope that helps. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. Scrolling on back up. I saw a couple other things. Adam, Joe, do you know if only the OMDs can be used for video, or the TG6 can be used as setup like you asked about previously? Adam, I don't know for a fact, but I am fairly sure that the TOGCHAT does not have an HDMI out. Meaning no, you would not want to use it for live streaming. If we're talking about like shooting B-roll or things like that, the Tough camera actually shoots nice video in general situations. Obviously, you've got limited controls and the limited ability to change lenses. You can't change lenses, right? But I've actually used it for B-roll in my videos before. And it does a great job. So give me a little bit more. If I haven't touched on what you're looking for there, Adam, give me a little bit more of kind of what you're trying to do. Okay. I just want to highlight this comment here, and I want to thank you for noticing, Kirsten. Photography meets psychology. Fantastic. All people photography. 80%. If you're going to do it well, is psychology. 20% is the camera. But that 20%, if you're going to do it well, you better know it. Like, know it. And that's the rub. That's the problem that so many photographers have, beginning with the fact that they never read their darn camera manuals, followed up by the fact that so many photographers don't even know how to properly hold their camera. There's only one way to hold your camera, folks, whether you like it or not. The fact of the matter is the camera was designed and engineered to be held one way and one way only. So anything you do differently, you may be getting pictures, but you are also not using the camera to its best advantage in the process. It's just a simple fact. Because the engineers who designed the camera, they applied physics. They are correct in the way it should be held. Just saying, right? So that's the thing. Yeah, all of this stuff, it's creating great images. Even when I talked about the idea of wildlife photography, right? Or you're just driving down the street and like, oh, there's a cool squirrel doing something, whatever. Grab that picture. If you have that response of like, oh my God, I should get a picture of that. Hell, even if it's your iPhone, grab the picture. But the point is, don't walk away with one frame. Now, if that animal's still there, or that sunset's still there, or whatever is going on, now you're going to take your real camera, and that's where you're going to ask yourself the whys. And you start with like, okay, why? Why is this picture special? What makes this unique? Wow, now what do I need to do to really create a unique image here? And you keep working the shot. You keep pushing through that and answering those questions. And that's how you're going to get to a good shot. So believe me, folks, it's a lot of psychology. Okay. From Dan. I had to overcome being an introvert when I was a bit forced into taking portraits of our CEO, CFO, managers, etc. Dan, sometimes being thrown into the line of fire is honestly the best way to learn, because what it does is it puts you in a situation where you realize, okay, the world is not going to end. I'm going to survive this, right? It doesn't work for everyone, but yeah, it works. I mean, for me, I know you guys would never believe it, but I am still to this day kind of a shy person. When I was younger, especially a kid and early teens, I was very shy. I was the kind of kid, I would cross the street just so I didn't have to say hi to somebody and make eye contact, like totally. And it was the camera that actually taught me not to be shy. I've told the story here before. Literally, I had a 7th grade teacher, 7th grade. I used to take my camera to school every day because I had just gotten it right before 7th grade started. And he walked up to my desk one day, my math teacher, and he put 2 rolls of film on my desk, like slammed them down on the desk. And so keep in mind, this is I was what, 13 years old, I think, 7th grade, something like that. 2 rolls of film, that was like gold. So I kind of looked at him with big eyes. I'm like, what is that for? And literally his words, which teachers today couldn't get away with, but this was back in the early 70s. He says to me, you bring that damn camera to class every day and I never see you taking pictures. I'm the advisor for the school yearbook. You're going to take pictures for the yearbook. Go take pictures. And I looked at him like, what do you want me to take pictures of? He's like, whatever you want. So I'm like, this is pretty cool, right? So I shoot 2 rolls of film. I take them back. He develops them because I hadn't learned how to develop film yet. And I come into class like a day later, and he gives me 2 more rolls of film and a little 3x5 card. And on the 3x5 card is my first assignment. So at first I was really excited. It's like, oh, this is really cool. But then I read what it was, and I had to go take pictures of some group. I don't remember what the group was, but I remember it was all 9th graders. I was in 7th grade. These are kids that never talked to me, and I was shy, and I literally panicked. School ended that day. It came time for me to go do this. I walked down the hall very sheepishly, got to the door where this group was, and they were typical of an after-school group. They were inside, and everybody was running around and throwing stuff, and they were laughing and yelling and having like this really good old time. And I'm standing outside in the hallway like, oh my God, like I can't do this. So finally, I at least got up enough guts to open the door and figure I'll walk in. It's like, well, let's see what happens, right? Because this math teacher, he's kind of a tough guy. So I'm like, man, if I show up and didn't do this, he's like going to give me grief about it. So I open up the door, and a kid like at the farthest point of the room sees me and yells out, the photographer's here. At which point I'm like ready to run out the door, but everybody stopped dead in their tracks. And suddenly everybody's really excited and comes walking over to me like, cool. Like, what do you want us to do? Where do you want us? Where do you want to take the picture? And here's all these 9th graders that never talked to me, that never would even look at me. But suddenly, because I had this camera, I was somebody. That was cool. And that kind of became my drug that fueled people photography, because I found people interesting, but I was used to just kind of observing people because I was scared to death to interact with them. Now it's like, if I'm with my wife or, with my son or, other people that like hit me on the arm, like, stop being so nosy. You don't have to ask so many questions, because I'll go to a restaurant or whatever, and if the waitress is interesting or the waiter or something, ask questions. And the fact is, people appreciate that, because I don't do it to make fun of people. I don't do it as a joke. I am truly and sincerely interested. So it takes practice, but Dan, I will tell you, you get thrown into a situation like that a couple of times, it gets a ton easier, and you start to realize, like, yeah, it's really not that bad. And here's the reality of it, Dan, and I'm sure you've probably figured this out since you are a bit of an introvert, but for all the rest of you that maybe haven't gotten to the point where you're gutsy enough, let me reassure you that even once you get kind of comfortable with talking to people, the awkward moments will still happen, because people are awkward, right? It happens. We all have it. But the more you at least kind of, get a little bit of confidence, and then you deal with something awkward, and then you get through that, it's like you get to the point where it's like, all right, the awkward stuff, you just kind of take it in stride, and, it happens. So, and Beverly, come on, me, quiet or shy? Yeah, I really am. I swear. Honest. So, all right. But let's see here. What else do I got? I know I got a couple more questions in here. I want to try and get everybody's in before we run out. Let's see. So I got Adam's question. And a follow-up too, by the way, on our product photography and all that we're talking about. Unitas mentioned focus stacking, which also works indeed for doing product work. And then Unitas said another great tool is a sparkler light, which is a little daytime balanced LED with a silver-faced reflector. The angle of incident reflection is key with this light, so it's obviously placement. Yeah, I mean, when you're going to start doing product work, you're going to find that you will start to collect any kind of odd little light or reflector surface you can. Like, for instance, Patrick, and I'm sure you've maybe figured this out already, but since I know you're doing a lot of product work and you've been posting it in my groups, go to a craft store. So I know you're in Paris. Here in the US, we have like Joann's Fabrics or Michael's or those kinds of stores. And you can get little pieces, round pieces of mirror in different shapes and sizes, like rectangles, round, larger ones, etc. Mirrors are outstanding for being able to direct the point light source to where you need it in your product shot. Even so this light, the lighting setup that I have in here, I've got one light in a softbox up here, which leaves this side of my face a little dark. And the problem with the setup is I'm really close to the green screen. So sitting over here, I have one of these Lumi lights, okay? which is both daylight LED and I can take it all the way down to 3200K, or I can blend it. Here, let me make it a little dimmer so you might actually be able to see the colors change. And so I'm using that as a fill. And this is actually, it's on a slap bracelet. So even for like doing product work, utilities like this come in, very handy. You can get these from Spiffy Gear. Here, I'll bring it up and I'll show you guys their website. And these things, if you watched my Stuck at Home Challenge videos, when COVID started, I was using the Lumis quite a bit. So here they're, actually, I called them Lumis. They don't call them Lumis now. Sorry. They're KYU6. There was a problem with other company that was using the LED names. Dan, the Lume Cubes, be careful with the Lume Cubes. I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy it. I would encourage you, though, try and get your hands on one and actually use it beforehand. Because for me, and so that's why I started. For me, the Lume Cube is a very small point light source, and they're actually pretty bright. Now, here's what I don't know, Dan. I don't know how much you can dim them down, right? But just make sure that you're comfortable with a light source that's that small. And if you are, knock yourself out. Patrick, you're welcome for the mirror tip. Mirrors are great for product work, super, super valuable. And plus, if you even get yourself some sheets of mirror material, they make kind of cool backgrounds if you want to really do some crazy stuff. But be prepared to spend a lot of time getting your lighting set up. But Patrick, mirrors, little small pieces of foam board, both white and black, because you want to have a reflector and then you want to be able to subtract light. All that kind of stuff is extremely helpful. So, okay. All right, let's see here. Ooh, and I'm late. And I think I got everything. Did I get them all? Tobias, thank you so much for the kind words, man. I really, really appreciate that. Let's see here. D-Psycho, it's the age thing. I was shy and quiet, and then I hit 40. Okay, hey, it's like whatever it takes, right? All right. So, gang, this is a great conversation tonight. Again, seriously, thank you all so much. One last quick announcement for you, just so you can go check it out. I have made some changes to my website, so I would love to have you guys go and look it over. It is, of course, joeedelman.com. At first glance, it's going to look very, very similar, but it's actually a theme that's going to allow me to take the website forward into some new technology that the internet is using and all that kind of stuff. So definitely check that out. And by the way, it's worth noting that I have an online presentation tomorrow evening, September 3rd, social media for photographers. So there is still time to register. Let me go ahead and grab that link. You should consider taking that one. If you haven't yet, it will be the last time I'll be offering this class. And then I'm going to do a whole new marketing series coming up in the fall. So that's right down the pike. And also, again, special thanks to PPA, the Professional Photographers of America, for sponsoring tonight's Talk Chat. It has been an honor over the last few weeks to be able to highlight PPA and all of the great things that they do for photographers. Remember, there's a special link in the description that will get you $25 off of your new membership and gets you Imaging USA for free in 2021. And if you ask me, it's worth it just for the equipment insurance alone. So check it out. So gang, as always, thank you for tuning in for a great night of chatting about all things photography. Have an awesome week. Stay safe. And of course, please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.